Over the last couple of weeks I've been riding with a power meter on my trek, and today I'm going to talk about some of the lessons I've learnt and a somewhat rather disappointing conclusion that I've reached. Back in October, I was sent a power meter from a company called Machine, which I fitted to my trek, and I rode on it for maybe 3 or 4 weeks before I put the bike away in the garage over the winter, and there it stayed until about 4 or 5 weeks ago when I got it out again for the spring and started riding it. Before we go any further, I'll just say a couple of things about the power meter itself. The sensors are attached to an Ultegra chain set, so there's one sensor on one of the chain rings on the right hand side and there's another sensor on the crank on the left hand side. The chainring set itself is a compact, so it's a 50-34, and it was incredibly easy to fit. Basically all I had to do was undo a couple of bolts on the old chain set, slide it out, slide the new one in, do the bolts back up, and I was good to go. It was actually quite fortunate because my old chain set was getting on for about 6-7 years old, and the actual teeth on the chain rings were starting to do something called shark toothing. So it was due for it to be replaced anyway. So thank you again, Machine, for sending me this power sensor. Back in November, I did my first ever FTP test with the help of my friend Chris. Now this test was conducted on my Saris H3 turbo trainer and its power meter, and the long and the short of it was that my FTP came out at 256 watts. Now there was a little bit of controversy around this, which I'm not going to go into now, but many people were saying to me that I should really try and do an FTP test actually out on the road, and since I've been riding the trek supplied with this power meter, that's precisely what I've been trying to do, and so far the numbers are looking really encouraging. I've paired the Machine power sensors up with my Hammerhead Karoo cycling computer, and the way I've got it set up is on page 1, down at the very bottom there, on the left hand side I've got the actual power that I'm putting out, and then to the right of it I've got the next field saying my average power so far. And I've been going out and doing various rides and keeping an eye on that all-important average power. One of the first big rides I did was up Bevis's Thumb and then up Harting Hill, and over the first hour my average power was 205 watts. But since then I've been out and I've actually done some proper tests where I've really pushed it fairly hard to try and get a fairly accurate assessment of my 1 hour and my 20-minute FTP. And yesterday I went out on my Edney's Lane route, and on the first 20 minutes my average power was 233 watts, and when I got home after approximately 1 hour's cycling the power was about 240 watts. All things considered, the FTP test that I did back in November that gave me an FTP of 256 watts wasn't massively different from the readings that I'm getting actually out on the road. Both the 20-minute quick test that I did and the 1 hour test that I did. So these are actual out on the road readings with a proper power sensor actually on the bike. The first lesson that I've learnt using a power meter is that unfortunately my power to weight ratio isn't all that great. Now while 230 watts, 240 watts for an hour is actually fairly good, when you divide that by my weight, the watts per kilo figure coming back is actually pretty disappointing. So that's the first thing that I've learnt using this power meter. The next lesson that I've learnt is that I've been cycling wrong for all of these years. Normally I would focus on having a high cadence, and my home cadence is probably around 90 revs per minute. I know I can sustain that fairly comfortably, almost indefinitely, depending on the terrain of course, but recently I've started upping that to about 95, 96, 97 revs per minute, and obviously to do that I need to ride in lower gears. And when I've been spinning away like that, looking at the power readings, the numbers are slightly lower than they are when I'm doing the opposite, which is mashing, so riding in higher gears at a lower revs. And I found that kind of my sweet spot there for maximum power is going to be with a cadence of about 85 revs per minute, and obviously then riding in a much higher gear. Now I'm not sure how that all actually translates to speed. Now the ride that I did yesterday is 25 kilometers with a fair bit of climbing. In fact, it's my Edney's Lane route. There's also a fair bit of descending there as well, and I try to complete that 25 kilometers in under an hour, and indeed yesterday I made it back home here in 55 minutes. A couple of other really important metrics that I display on my Karoo cycling computer is my heart rate and the percentage of my maximum heart rate. Now I know that my max heart rate is 166 beats per minute, and the ride I did yesterday I was riding round with round about 90% of that. Now when you look at that in context with the power to weight ratio and the average power, it starts to get even more disappointing. According to the heart rate, I'm riding pretty much close to my limit, and according to the average power, I'm riding pretty much close to my FTP as well, and still the speed isn't, you know, that great. I was averaging yesterday doing about 25 kilometers an hour, and particularly on the climbs I would say that I'm still fairly slow. So if I'm riding at my maximum heart rate, at kind of my maximum FTP power output, and still going quite slowly, yeah, there's only one way that that's going to go, and that's if I want to get faster on the bike, I need to improve my power to weight ratio, which basically means I need to lose some weight. But having said that, that's not exactly news, that's more like old history. So I think the plan for me then over the next coming months at least is to try and trim down a little bit. And while I've always said this is a cycling channel and not a weight loss channel, I'm still going to maintain that. I will be trying to kind of just lighten up a little bit in the background and trying to improve my power to weight ratio. So there we go, that's the long and the short of riding with a power meter in the first couple of weeks. Hopefully I will be able to improve my power to weight ratio and in the long run improve my overall speed on the bike. Thanks for watching.